How are you, B? I see that you are at your home in San Francisco.
Yes, yes, I'm well. It was nice to have a weekend with not too much going on, although I got a last minute invitation to go to an amazing outdoor concert at Stern Grove here in San Francisco, which was the San Francisco Symphony with a Hawaiian ukulele virtuoso and her band. And it was amazing. So that was really cool. I did that yesterday with some of my some of my friends from the Egypt trip I went on with Russ Hudson and also Enneagram friends. So that was good. How are you doing? What's going on with you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I had a somewhat relaxing weekend, just helping my daughter, especially with a few things connected to her university applications, but also watched three movies actually. Two of them I won't recommend because I didn't like, and the third one. Is actually, I think, a little bit difficult for people to find because it's Brazilian, about a very important Brazilian actor called Pixinguinha. And maybe someone could research and then see Pixinguinha. Yeah, I find it so difficult to spell in English still. It's like one of those few things like spelling and counting. I still need to do it in my own language in my head and then translate. It's not automatic.
Well, that's not exactly an easy one for us English speakers.
Mhm.
Sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. Other than that, all good. I'm here at my home in London, and
I watched the movie you recommended, Mickey 17, and I
mm,
thought it was very interesting and really, you were right that an interesting movie about a type 9 with a type 9 character at the center.
yeah, yeah. I just find that movie very, very, very smart. And yeah, by Bong Joon Ho, I think he's one of the best movie directors, and I find it so interesting to see the mechanical nature of society and how it plays out in today's world. Yeah, and
Yeah, a lot of
but also
correspondences.
the path of growth for a nine is remarkable there.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
interesting. Hey, I noticed there's going to be a new TV show on with that one of those guys from that TV show you like a lot. Is it Top Gear?
Yeah, I used to like it more, but yes, yes. The
That one of those funny British guys who, and
mhm.
I think you had them all their Enneagram types in mind, but one of them has a new, some sort of interesting looking reality show. I'll have to look it up for you because I know you like those guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, good.
Anything else you want to catch up on before we interview our very special guest?
No, I think it's fine.
Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we have a very special guest. Today we're talking with Diana Chapman, who is someone I've admired from afar from a long time. Sometimes not so far. We've gotten together over the years, but she is a founding partner of the Conscious Leadership Group. She is co-author of the 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership and has been doing really extraordinary work with leaders for many, many years in many different ways. And we're going to let her explain what her work is all about in a way better than we can. But welcome, Diana. It's so good to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this call.
Yeah,
Yes.
happy to have you, Diane. Thank you, Diana.
Mhm.
So let's just start with hearing, for especially for people in our audience who may not have heard of your work or know of your work. You worked with leaders for such a long time in so many different ways. The things you've created are truly amazing. And by the way, everywhere I go, whenever I'm always hearing your name and I'm always hearing about the work that you've done. I think you've made a huge impact in kind of the world of leadership. But give us a little bit of your story, your background. Maybe how did you come to this, and maybe integrating into that, like how did you come to know the Enneagram as part of the work you do?
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is fun. Especially that Enneagram part. Okay, so how did I get into this work? Uh, 30 years ago, my brother-in-law was the CEO of Monsanto, which, at that time was sort of booed by a lot of people, but he was one of the most conscious, he was considered one of the most conscious leaders in the country. A deeply devoted meditator, Bob Shapiro, was known for revolutionary culture in his company. And he said, I'm going to give you a gift of $5,000. And you can do whatever you want with this money. But if I were you, I would work with who I think are the world's finest coaches, Gay and Kathleen Hendricks at the Hendricks Institute. Fly out to California, go spend some time with them. So I was a seeker at that time, and I thought, heck, I'm taking the money and let's go. So I asked my husband, would you go? So we went out to California, spent 5 days with them, and it was like the lights got turned on in ways I had not experienced with all the other teachers I had sat with. There was something about their work that was very impractical and impactful and playful and quick. And at that time, I remember thinking, like, this is tragic that these tools aren't out more broadly in the world, and I'm going to do everything I can to get it out there. And that was the beginning of a journey. And I started coaching, and I somehow got hooked in with YPO. Somebody invited me to come be an assistant, and that really hit.
And
And the
YPO is the
Young
is
Presidents Organization, yeah. So I got very popular in that organization, traveled the globe, and then built a practice out of that. And they were always asking questions, well, where can I read more about above and below the line? Where can I read more about these things? And there wasn't really anything. And so I thought, gosh, I wish there was a book out that spoke to these certain topics. And so we started the Conscious Leadership Group and wrote the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. Jim Dethmer and I and Kaylee Klemp originally all got together to do that. And we were all in YPO. And so we were all looking for the same tools on how to serve our clients. And so that's how that got started. And then how I came upon the Enneagram, I studied with these two Toltec shamans, Diamond and River Jameson, and we were down in Zion National Park with them, myself and two other women. And we had hired them for a private retreat. And while we were hiking around in these beautiful views, they started to tell us about the Enneagram and, did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is typed us. But it was great. I'm so glad they did. And so they sat us down, I think, toward the end of the event after they'd spent some time with us and said, okay, here's what types we think you all are. And here's what you need to know. And I felt more gotten than I have ever felt in my life. I was like, how? How do you know all these things? How do you know this about me? And, I think like most people, when they first find out, you're both like excited that you're just a meme in a way, like you're just an algorithm. And then you're also kind of like, oh, I'm just an algorithm. So it was that tension between those two places. And they typed me as an 8 and it hit perfectly. And I started to spend a lot of time learning about Enneagram and I just loved it. And now it is front and center of all the work I do. I don't work with anybody now anymore that doesn't get typed first. And we're going to dive right in with all that. So I think Enneagram is the most powerful of all tools out there for personal self-awareness and development. And I'm so, so grateful for the model. It's changed my parenting. It's changed my marriage. It's changed my friendships. Everybody in my family, my parents, everybody got typed. It changed their marriages. It changed the whole family system.
Wow.
So I'm the biggest fangirl. I can't think of anybody who's a bigger fangirl maybe than the two of you and others who are teaching this stuff. I mean, I just love it. I love it so much.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And can you say a little bit more about how it helped you as understanding that you were an eight? Like what impact did that have, and what did you start to learn about yourself, or maybe what have you learned about yourself all this time?
Yeah. I think particularly I learned, I'm really actually quite sensitive.
Mm.
Um, and very sensitive. And I, really put a nice crusty shield over that. And to be able to be shown that and say, look, this is this pattern you do, and to see it and go, oh wow, and be able to slowly take those layers of protection off and let that more tender, sensitive side come out. It's just been liberating, honestly. It just touches me so much.
Hmm. I love that the first thing you say when I asked that was how sensitive you are, because I think a lot of people don't get that, especially people who only learn the Enneagram superficially, and some people don't realize they're only working with it superficially. But that is something really important to understand about eights, is that, like you say, while you may have this sort of a shield around it, you may look tough, that there's so much sensitivity inside. And as one of my eight friends says, one of the reasons why I can be so strong and sort of assert myself is because I care so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So much care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very, very important descriptor of AIDS when we consider the levels of awareness and the growth journey. And I'm also thankful you brought that up. And sometimes BNI say that AIDS might look like a war tank in the outside, but in the inside and through the cannon of the war tank, there is marshmallow coming out. Like and actually, we have a student that during a retreat, we nicknamed her as Marshmallow, and she loved it. And now she calls herself Marshmallow, but she has upgraded to call herself Little Marshmallow now.
Mini marshmallow.
Mini
Mini
Marshmallow.
marshmallow. That's even better. I love mini marshmallow. I'm going to remember that one.
But not everybody sees that, yeah, on AIDS. It's just
Yeah.
like hidden, as you say. But
Mhm.
as time goes by, it gets less and less hidden.
Yeah. Yeah. And also really recognizing how, there is that voice that says, watch out. People could betray you and hurt you, and you better be strong and powerful and in charge. And how easy it was to just think that was true.
Yes.
And I've really enjoyed the mantra of the world is such a friendly place.
Mm.
And and expecting that and getting that, it's wild how the world changed when I changed that story.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like the way you put that, because that is kind of how the ego shows up for all of us. It's like whispering in your ears
Yeah.
negative stuff like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you better put up your defenses. Oh,
Yeah.
can't trust that person."
Yeah.
And that is the source of how things go wrong, almost like in a cycle, when we interact with people and their egos. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you say something about how it impacted your marriage since you, and I know I've met your husband, he's very lovely, and because I think that's always interesting to hear too, like how did you work together knowing your types?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, one of the things that was interesting is he was first typed as a 5.
Mm,
And, I could see a 5 in him, but he never really fully felt like the Enneagram worked for him.
mhm,
And, and so I don't know, about 10 years in, somebody finally said, I don't think you're a 5. I think you're a 1. And he read it and said, I think this might be true. And so started to try that on, and that was true too. And he was extremely abused. And I think 5 was a pattern that he put on as an overlay, but
uh-huh,
wasn't really his true pattern.
mhm,
And so but it still helped thinking he was a 5, honestly, because that was still a pattern he had created.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was helpful to understand that, the, why he was going so into trying to figure it all out, trying to learn, being more introverted in his observing. And then once the 1 came on, then because he's a 1 that keeps it all inside rather than expresses it outside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so he started to reveal all that internal criticism. And he does have a perfectionist. And I often used to roll my eyes like, dude, who cares about the spoons up in the dishwasher? Like, you're making this such a big deal. I would even send him, the documentation that says, in surveys, spoons are just as clean. But he was like, no. And so now we have this wonderful way we play with certain parts of ourselves that are very type specific, that can get a little, I would call it like a little crimped,
Yeah.
a little contracted.
Yeah.
So sometimes, I'll hear his voice, Diana, and I know like, oh my God, here comes the perfectionist at its fruit. Whatever it is, I know I'm going to come. So I come into the room and there he is standing by the dishwasher, and so now we play with these parts. And so I'll go, Sergeant Carter reporting for dishwasher duty, sir, and then as soon as I play, he plays, then he realizes his pattern, because for that moment he was in a, like, this is kind of panicky. And then, he plays and we have fun with it. And I look forward to those moments now. And, Diana, I go into the bathroom. This cabinet drawer is open 2 inches. Why is that happening? And he's, it's a big deal over there in his world. So, and vice versa. He knows exactly how to settle me down, like in 2 seconds now. So very, very helpful.
Beautiful.
And how did it change your parenting? I think you mentioned this earlier on.
Yeah, I have a daughter who's a type 4, and I just was trying to parent her the way I wanted to be parented, which was working horribly. And so I went to a 4 and I said, here, what do you think I should do? My daughter was 10 at the time. I was guessing, but I was pretty clear she was a 4. And this woman gave me like a script, and I literally did my best to memorize that script. I went into her room one day and I said everything the coach had told me to say. And my daughter pauses. She looks up at me and she goes, I don't know who you're talking to, but it's totally working. And I was like, yes, I'm figuring out. So I got a lot of coaching from that for a while to learn how to really think about how my daughter wants to be supported. And it was very helpful. And then my son being a 5 was also like such a profoundly different world than I live in. And I think, honestly, if I had not had Enneagram education, I would have been really a bully to him, because I would have been like, get out of your room and get out of, have a world that looks more like mine. And I was much more sensitive and empathetic and understanding that was actually a healthy world for him.
Right, right, right. Yeah, what someone's doing that looks so strange to us is actually good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, wait, you want to be that isolated from everybody? Like, I would be depressed.
Right. You want to go to the party?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5s, thank you on behalf of your son. I thank you. Yeah. Now, maybe we can talk a little bit about your applications in leadership. And you have this beautiful model of the 15 commitments. I don't know what you would like to share about them, and then how you use the Enneagram with leaders, and maybe tell us a few cases if you can.
Sure. So we use this model. It's a very simple model of above the line and below the line. And the above the line is I'm in a state of trust, or I might even call it love. And below the line, I'm in a state of threat. And we're all bouncing around moment to moment, back and forth between above and below the line. That's just so human. And in my opinion, the Enneagram is really such a beautiful map for what's going to cause me to go below the line and what will it look like. And so each type has its own unique ways. It bounces back and forth. And so I love to combine those two models. And then the commitments, we wrote these 15 commitments, which are, we got them from Gay and Kathleen Hendricks, the first several of them. And then we iterated them on the rest of them. But basically, people would say, well, how do I know if I'm above or below the line? What would be the distinguishing qualities? So, for example, well, if you're taking responsibility, then you're going to be above the line. If you feel like you're in victimhood, you'll be in reactivity. If you are questioning your mind and letting it be open and curious, you'll be above the line. If you're righteous and wanting to prove you're right, you'll be below the line. And so if you're going to feel feelings above the line, if you're going to repress them, below the line, and so on. And so the Enneagram can show you which of those commitments might be more difficult, and how might they be more difficult. So certain types. So for example, I'm working with a lot of sevens right now. 7 founders, tech founders. Seems like I have sevens all day long, and it's
Yeah,
like
Silicon Valley, I think tech founders, a lot of them are sevens.
a lot of sevens,
Yes.
and a lot of them don't want to be with fear and how scared they are, especially in the AI world. They're really scared about, we're creating out these things very quickly, and we don't really know what this is going to look like, and they don't know how to be with their fear. And so some of them know they're not sleeping well at night, but they don't know how to move fear through the body and welcome fear and let fear be a thing. So that's one of the things I'm putting attention on with these folks is, can you find that fear somatically? Can you breathe with it, welcome it, move it through? And then can we listen? Because fear is really intelligent when it's in presence. And so, it's asking you to pay attention to something. There's something that needs to get learned. So helping them learn how to use that as a source of intelligence along with their brilliant minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's a great example. And I love that you're talking about things that people don't really want to look at as part of their personality.
Yeah.
The blind spots, which the Enneagram is so good at pointing out to people and helping them understand. And so that makes a lot of sense. Now, do you notice, how do you see yourself as a body type? Um, maybe what are your particular skills or capacities when it comes to working with leaders as an aide and as a body type?
Yeah. So I am such gut instinct. That is the way I roll. I feel so much, and people can tell me, like, I'm thinking about going left versus right, and I have so much information in my body about which way that might, what might happen either way. And so people use me a lot for that, as a gut check. But then I want to say to them, you have this skill in you too. So that's a big piece I'm working with a lot of my leaders, is helping them really tune into their instinctual intelligence, whether they're a head, heart, or gut type, because some of the gut types even don't have as much access to it as they'd like.
Right.
And so I love this concept called whole body yes, which is something that I got from my mentor, Katie Hendricks. And it's really about listening to head, heart, gut, and all 3 centers and from presence. And they all together give you very good uh, mapping for how you want to move around in the world. And so I was in New York 2 weeks ago working with the Kauffman Fellows, which trains venture capitalists. And we were talking, the whole concept was around how do you make really impeccable agreements? And a lot of people break agreements. That's a way you create a lot of drama at work, is through sloppy agreements and broken agreements. And I say, that happens because you didn't really check in to see, is it what you wanted? Did you have a whole body yes? And that's often, you've got to include that somatic, that instinctual intelligence along with your emotional and intellectual when you make those decisions. And then also just talked about in general, how do you make decisions more from instinct, and how do you navigate leadership when we have multiple leaders in the room? Some are head types that are saying, I want to see your data. And then some, an 8 comes in and says, I think we got to go, north and right there. And everybody goes, how do you know that? And they go, I don't have any information. And then it creates a tension in the room. And so we talked a lot about how leaders need to learn to value each one equally,
Right.
and start to look at each other's track records,
Mm.
because the gut types do have great track records as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. We often talk about how body intelligence is by far the least well understood intelligence.
Yeah.
And yet, exactly like the way you're saying, it is a co-equal intelligence.
Yes.
It's just as important as head intelligence or heart intelligence. And in our society, often people don't even understand what you're talking about. So I can imagine the way you talk about that is so clear, and you being a body type and you having the experience of being able to know what that feels like and to emphasize the gut knowing in a way that I can imagine is a big relief to especially body type leaders.
Yes. And so I do a lot where I say, imagine your body is a bag of bits. All these little bits are doing things all the time. And they're always in some kind of motion. Some people will say, like, there's pain here, or, it hurts, but it sounds like it's stuck or something. And so I say, I want you to imagine there's bits, and these bits are always doing things, and describe them in verbs ending with ing. So there's swirling, there's pulsing, there's warming, and so can you start noticing what's happening in different parts of the body? And can you describe them with these verbs ending in ing, and start to feel how they can move and be shifting around? And that's really helpful because most people never got that training,
Mm.
just to pay attention to and be able to report at them as something in motion, even
Yeah.
if it's throbbing or twinkling or whatever, tickly. People find that, oh yeah, the more I pay attention to it, it's like a muscle, that it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot going on actually,
Mm.
and there is information in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you bring in the body in your work. We also do this a lot in our work at CP Enneagram Academy. And I find it interesting because you talk about 15 commitments for leaders and teams. And commitment to me is a body type word, it's a very instinctive word. Now, I was, wondering, some of the commitments you talk about are easier or more difficult according to the Enneagram type, like more natural or not, counter instinctive for some. How do you approach this?
Yeah. Well, we like to ask them. We have a sense of which ones will be more difficult, but we like to ask them which ones feel counterintuitive or more difficult. Um, so, for example, Enneagram sixes might say, I don't know about this sourcing safety from within. What's that mean? And so they'll usually report the ones that are the most challenging. And then it's our job to help them, one, understand the difference. What does that really mean above and below? And then what are the unique ways that they could start to practice that? And I really like um, playing. I think human beings, we now know, children like learn 40 times faster through play than without it. And I think adults are probably going to we'll test that they're similar. I'm talking to some different people who are studying that right now. So I like to do what's called persona play. So I'll say, what one of these are some of the difficult ones and how are they difficult? And then we will have them create a persona that either exaggerates how they think it's difficult or is the antithesis of how they think it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, I'll take them out to dinner publicly, and they have to play out this part. And they get to have a direct experience of what it's like to have, because they're playing it, they're actually in it, so they're having some embodiment of it. They're having a relationship when they're talking to the staff of a restaurant. They're having to think like that part, and then something pops where they start to understand there's value there,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a cost to either way they're doing it, and then that starts to get integrated. And I really love having people think about it playfully, like, oh, that's a part. And sometimes I'll even say, like, what's the theme song of that pattern? And then they play the theme song when they first get up in the morning as a way to integrate um, this. So it starts to become, so they start to loosen up, the range of who they are.
Either by making it more exaggerated so they're seeing it, it sort of becomes silly,
Yeah.
or the opposite. Interesting.
Yeah. And being able to, and especially being able to do things that feel really scary. Like, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to be that way.
Hmm.
So if we can let them go, well, you're only going to play it. We're just going to play pretend for a minute. It gives the ego it's like, okay, I can play it for a minute. And
Hmm.
then that helps relax it a little bit. And then the play starts to loosen up the whole pattern.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love how much you use play because it reminds me of back when I was a psychotherapist. Some of there's like a theme in psychoanalytic literature that's about play, that
Uh-huh.
is about how it opens up space, and oftentimes when you see some adults who had like a particularly difficult childhood, sometimes what happens is they were never allowed to play,
Yeah.
and that is really debilitating in certain ways, or they had to become an adult really quickly. That's I really love the way you use that to loosen things up, because I do think sometimes that's what the personality needs. It needs to be loosened up so we can sort of see how contracted it is and how much it operates as a defense.
Yeah. Um, so let me think about, I'm coaching an Enneagram 9, and he's saying, he's actually in a YPO group, and he's saying, I don't agree with what many of the members want to do with some of our time, but I don't speak up.
Mm.
And I feel frustrated about that. I also, with my co-founder, I'm not inserting my opinion as much. And so I asked, who is somebody out there that speaks up a lot? And he picked a mob boss from a movie that he saw. And so I said, can we pretend you have that mob boss? Because he couldn't find it inside of himself. So I said, could we just dig him up? He's probably down in a cellar someplace. Can we pull him out? And so I had him try it on and exaggerate a little bit, and he thought it was kind of fun. And then I interviewed that part
Mm.
and asked a little bit about what happened, where did it have to go, and why did
Mm.
it do that, and what are the benefits and what are the costs. And so he started to have an experience speaking from the part itself.
Wow.
And then, so now he has on his phone every day, it pops up and asks, what would that part do right now if it had say about what's going on? And
Mm.
so he said that's training him to just open up and come outside of the personality structure that put that away.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Love all that, and I can see that you use sound and modern methods, and at the same time I also see that you use gifts that a type 8 has, like for instance play with enthusiasm, being practical, like see this and do it, like
Yes.
you're going to do and then
Embody it.
experience,
Yeah.
and then you
That
talk about
embodiment. Yeah.
examples, embodiment, but also I think I'm hearing a few things that require you to work on yourself to be able to do, that are not the most natural for an 8, and this is a compliment. So I think I heard you say that you use metaphors, which is not the most common thing for an 8, or that you do all this in a very participatory way, and that it
Asking questions and
requires you to ask
listening.
questions and listen, but also you talk about vulnerability, emotions like fear. I guess my question is, how did you come to the point of doing those harder things for Nate?
Mm. Well, I I guess I used my lust to go into just creating a life which was pretty nonstop personal development. I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn everything about what is it to be present and not present. And with my type and others types, and some people who come to visit my husband and I at our house, they say, are you guys ever not on? Like, it seems like you're always on about everything around paying attention to presence. And my husband said, we're always on. And I, and I do think there is just a devotion I have to paying attention. And, I'll just say, oh, Diana, look at you. You're getting triggered right now, sweetheart. I
Mm,
can watch myself and, oh, what's going on? And I have so much compassion for myself.
mm,
Um, and so much like, I'm like, oh my God, you're adorable. Look at you. You're just getting all reactive and here we go.
mm,
And I think that kind of devotion um, has really changed, just changed my life so much.
mm, mhm,
Um, and my husband too is just we're both so empathetic toward one another.
mm,
Like,
mhm,
oh gosh, you're having a moment. Okay.
mhm.
And being able to hold space for that and help it relax quickly. That's one of the things I've really learned is that every time I go below the line, I'm just scared.
Mm,
Just got scared. And, I'm probably 2 or 6 or 12 years old, or I'm young, and
mm.
can I just be with that? And so I've done a really good job of learning how to mother and father myself.
I was going to
Um,
say, it sounds like you have so much compassion for your inner child.
yeah,
And of course, inner child work is good for all of us, but I think especially for eights, and it can be really challenging for eights. We've seen people really struggle, some eights, with like almost like it doesn't compute to have compassion for their inner child, for that sweet little hurt child inside them. And so I hear it so much in the way you talk about yourself and others. So I think that's a beautiful piece that I think is I want to highlight.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I can remember earlier in my life not really having much connection to that at all.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah,
So, and I work with a lot of eights for whom they have no connection. They don't know anything about that little one
yeah,
in there.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So this talks about you because a
yeah,
more basic eight just thinks, oh, this is touchy feely. Don't come with this kind of talk
yeah.
to me. And so I think
And
you
I
must.
actually can remember myself, sorry to interrupt. I can remember myself in my first round of therapy, like the early years of being in therapy. I remember my therapist once like talking to me about my inner child. And I remember that nothing could have sounded like more unattractive to me than getting in touch with my inner child. I was like, what are you talking about? And
mm,
it's interesting that that's just bringing back to me that moment where I could feel how that was the last thing I wanted to do. And it's
mm,
so interesting how that's really the road to so much development, and yet I think it's really hard for, and like
Yeah,
you're saying, for eight leaders, especially in position of power. I can imagine sometimes it's hard.
yeah, I hear
oh,
you.
so,
I hear you, and I think makes sense, but I don't think unattractive would be the adjective that aides would use. It's more like this
Right,
is
that's more
so
of a
weak.
type
This
word.
is such
weak.
a
Yeah,
waste of time and touchy feely. Bad. But
yeah,
so I think you must model vulnerability to your clients, and if a Nate does that, it becomes more powerful. And I
yeah.
remember B told me once a very interesting description of modern leadership, which was, I think, good leaders are selectively vulnerable.
Mm,
Yeah,
mhm,
that's one that came from the business school at Stanford. The mark of a good leader is the capacity to selectively self-disclose vulnerability.
mm,
So that was something. I also always remember I read a definition of leadership that you wrote. I think it was even on in social media or something that I really liked, that always stuck with me. And you probably have many definitions of leadership, good leadership, but yours, the one I remember was um, taking responsibility for your impact on
yeah.
others. I
That's
thought
my that's
I
my go-to.
I love
Yeah,
that so
yeah,
much,
yeah,
because it also speaks to how anyone could be a leader.
yeah.
And I think sometimes people don't get their impact that they're having. And I really like that definition.
Yeah, I really like that too. And, I was a stay at home mom for 12 years, and I felt like that was a beautiful time of leadership in my life.
Ah, yeah.
And so I'm very sensitive to everybody's a leader.
Yeah.
If For those of you who say, I want to take responsibility for my impact, and at that time it was raising my children and
Mm,
um, helping support the schools. And those were things that mattered to me then. And so, yeah, I love the empowerment of that for everybody. And I think that is one of the things that really matters to me is everybody feel really empowered.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So it sounds like you don't only use the Enneagram yourself with your clients, but you also talk explicitly about it with them. Is this true?
Yes, exactly. My husband actually is a typer. I'm not a good typer.
Mm,
He's so sensitively aware. And so he types them. And then it's the very first conversation we have actually is, okay, we're going to explore together. And I want to introduce you to your type. And we're going to be including that here. And I send them off more things to read about. And
Right.
it's
I
right
wonder.
up front because we just move
Hmm,
so much faster.
yeah.
mm.
I like much more when people do it this way, like they really talk about it. I think there are many benefits, but also, have you noticed over time that people overall are getting less and less resistant to something like the Enneagram?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because my question was going to be, do you have you had experience where people are resistant to the Enneagram? And so I think that's a good, maybe that question. And then Uranio's, have people been getting less resistant?
So, yes, resistant. And I have a superpower for people's resistance.
I'm, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
So I go, I know, you've heard blah, 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 no science, whatever, blah. I said, you're going to just entertain me because we're going to play, we're going to experiment around, but here's the deal. I'm going to promise you. And if you don't believe it, I'm going to give you your money back. And I literally say that.
Wow.
Like, you'll get your money back, but I promise you, that's how confident I am that you are going to value this.
Wow.
And so, and it definitely, Enneagram is much less resistance. It's really wonderful. Even, and it seems like it's exponentially getting faster. How much less resistance there is, even over the last year or two.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, when we bring it to teams, we type the whole team. You guys, maybe do this too. But
Yeah.
everybody says afterwards, like, we are so much more empathetic
Yeah.
of one another. We understand each other more. Like, it's just a no-brainer that everybody says that was a valuable use of their time.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, so it sounds like you give them room to say no, but also say, "Hey, just try it, and if it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back." I love that.
Yeah. But but usually I'll say, I mean, now I'm good enough here and I have a reputation where I say, look, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've
Yeah.
tried everything. I was a junkie. I trained with everybody in the beginning in
Mhm.
all kinds of ways. And I'm just telling you, like, I'm really good at finding the best of the best. And
Mhm.
Enneagram is that. And I
Mhm.
think that people can feel my conviction and my confidence. And that is, I think, where the Enneagram 8 using their confidence to support people feeling a little more relaxed is helpful.
Right.
So it's like, trust me, I got this. I wouldn't hurt you here.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. That's the good side of the 8 confidence.
Yeah, I have an experience that when I started working with the Enneagram, and this was like over 25 years ago, I did a research with different, as a good five, with practitioners all over the world, and why some were more successful than others when working with the Enneagram in business. And what I found out as the main thing is that the more successful ones were not apologetic about working with the Enneagram. They showed self-confidence, and they didn't try to hide anything. So yeah, good job.
Yeah. And I also just say, if you don't want to do it, then I'm not your coach.
Yes.
It's not negotiable because my effectiveness knowing your type will, it's a better use of our time.
Exactly. That's another way I've thought of it is when there's people who are too resistant, I'll just say, there's other people you can work with,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be me. Um, and I think too, it's easier to work with people who are open to this because then the work just flows because people get it. And of course, um, and I can imagine people also come to you because you use the Enneagram, because, like you said, you've developed a reputation over time, and it works. And one of the things I love that you said is it's faster. That's the thing is it's so efficient, it's so effective at getting to the heart of the matter so much more quickly, and I think that's also an important thing to bring up.
Yeah, and at least in my case, I noticed that resistance nowadays is not as much as it used to be like 15, 20 years ago. Especially the millennials, I think, are more open. But I don't know if this matches your experience.
It's night and day.
Isn't
It's
it?
a complete, and most, here in Silicon Valley, everybody, usually now Enneagram, and a lot of people know they know the term, at least they know the concept. Whereas, even 10 years ago, half the people were like, I've never heard of that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I would start going into rooms with teams a few years ago where they were all like in their 20s and early 30s. And I would bring the Enneagram across and I would, have there was always a little bit of like, how is this going to go? But everyone was like, yeah, it's just obvious and self-evident that this is something that makes sense and something to be embraced as something helpful and interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's very exciting. And, there's more and more books coming out, and supposedly there's some science coming together to help us, get up there for those who really do think that they need some of that, things like,
But I loved what you said, how I mean, because I'm one of those people who doesn't really need the science behind
right.
it. And so when I heard a little bit of that in what you said, and that made me feel good because whenever people go down that road, I'm like, well, I don't need to please the scientists to know that this is really effective. Um,
Well, and what I say is I do have science,
yes,
because the science that I have is I've been in the laboratory working with people. I have data
yes,
myself of how it's made a difference from observable science. And I teach a class at Stanford, and they liked the 15 commitments. They said, how did we actually, this was coming from the D school, and the D school's purpose for to exist was trying to figure out how to make effective teams. I don't know if you know
the
that.
D school. What is the
The
D?
design school at Stanford
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
was created because there was concern that the Japanese and Chinese were outperforming the United States
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, in the automotive and stereos and all these things. And they actually thought of it as like this could be a national security issue. So they
Interesting.
created the design school to study how do teams effectively work together to design better.
Mm,
So we
interesting.
need to figure out that in the United States so we can compete. So
Right.
the design school was created, and basically they came up with a list that was very similar to the 15 commitments.
Wow.
And so this list um, had on it all these things that they had studied. They and people wired up and all these, and they said, how did you guys come to these conclusions? Because they're the same conclusions we came up to, but we did all this scientific rigor. We just said, we just tried things on,
Mm,
and learned from our results, just personally. But in a way, my argument is we both did it in our own scientific ways.
right, right. It's self-verifying. It's like when you see person after person after person of a particular type doing things a particular way, that's very persuasive.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we now say, I teach a course in the engineering school called capital formation, which is how do you create and maintain and sustain a organization. And
Mm.
we're now saying consciousness is capital,
Wow, interesting.
which I really like. There's money that's capital, and people are capital, but consciousness is capital. And
Mm.
I really feel like that's going to be the new era here as we are navigating, this more complex world we're starting to create together.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I hope that idea catches on
Yeah.
yeah.
because it makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you integrate the Enneagram with different kinds of teamwork that you might do, or developing teams or training teams.
Yeah. 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 And just to see, like, you know, if there's a large group of people and they're having a big issue, have all the gut types sit in the corner and then the heart types and the head types, and have you all talk about this issue and then come back together and learn about how you all looked at it from slightly different angles,
Yeah,
you know,
interesting.
and what you cared about and why it mattered that we want that diversity.
Mm, right.
Um, so, yeah, so many ways to play with, you
Yeah.
know, looking at how your patterns impact your collaboration, your creativity.
Right, right, right. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I think you're so right that typing it's the crucial entry point to the Enneagram. We have recently developed a test, but we also teach a typing interview as part
Right.
of our professional certification program. And we think it's really, really important for any practitioner working with the Enneagram that they learn to ask those good questions and
Yeah.
have a systematic interview where they can really get to a clearer picture. And of course, we integrate subtype in everything we do, and I know that you do as well. Which
Yeah.
it can be complicated, but it in the end it really clarifies what's happening because two different eights, two different fives, two different twos can look very different depending on subtype.
Yeah, I really appreciate your work in the subtypes. I went to many, many Enneagram conferences, but sometimes they put everybody of one type together. So I was in a room with maybe 48s.
Hmm.
And they started to say, "You're not an eight. You get out of here."
Right.
And I said, "I am too an eight. You, yeah, oh yeah, I'm an eight." You know, I was trying to push it,
Yeah.
push my force around a little bit. And
Yeah.
I came outside and I said to somebody who was one of the an Enneagram expert that was there, I said, "Look, they're telling me I'm not an eight." She goes, "Oh, that's because you're a social eight,
Yes.
and you don't have your the counter here." And so that was so helpful to have some explanation of why.
Yeah.
In particular, I didn't have as much. They were saying they all had big challenges in their lives where they had made a mess and they were still trying to clean it up, you know.
Right.
And I didn't have much of that, and so I just was like, I don't really relate to that. And so that was one of the couple of things they were pointing to.
Yeah.
I didn't have as much spilled blood in my life.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. The social aid is just they're a little more empathetic. They're like you say, you and your husband are empathetic. They're a little more like wanting everyone to feel okay. They're a little more two-ish. They're really wanting to protect people and make them
yeah, but
feel
also
better.
it was like I didn't want to get kicked out of the tribe, so I had to
Right.
figure out, why does everybody want me to be here? What do, I got to be a little more, it was
Right.
a lot around. I could really see I really wanted to be in the group.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's frustrating too when people don't understand the subtypes and so they tell someone like you that you're not an eight. They just don't understand the different shades of eight and the
Yes.
way they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I do want to thank you so much. I want to say one more thing about your work, which I just want to highlight. I just love that above the line, below the line thing, and I know it's what you're really known for. It's such a central part because it's so simple
Yeah.
and yet so powerful.
Mhm.
And I've run into different like leaders I've coached that bring that and say, "Oh, I know this," and they use it all the time. And so I
Yeah.
just really want to appreciate you and the way you've integrated that with the Enneagram because
Mhm.
I think in a way it's that vertical piece that we talk about. So the Enneagram is the horizontal is there are these 9 types. They're all kind of basically the same in terms of functional strengths and challenges, but then there is this vertical thing, and we need to be seeing where we are. And we have a levels of awareness model. But your above the line, below the line sort of practice is such a clear, practical, in the moment measure that can bring a kind of consciousness to people of, okay, where am I now? It's that sort of pausing and recognizing, ooh, like just in the last few days I myself had a day where I'm like, I am in a really bad mood. you know and I think that even to add that, oh, I'm below the line right now. There's something about that sort of, and it also, it fits in with different kinds of levels of awareness models, which do have a kind of, there's a, like David Hawkins has a level of integrity,
Hmm.
and it's like a similar thing. And to recognize, am I in sort of love and trust and openness, or am I in fear and threat and defense?
Yeah,
And
it's so
so
simple.
I really appreciate that. And so much of what you do seems to have that combination of sort of fun and play and creativity and practical usefulness and effectiveness,
Mm.
and so it makes me feel good about us, that we are in the same tribe with you, of someone who sees the value of the Enneagram so clearly and brings it in so many ways. And
Oh,
so thank you for your work, and thanks for you. And I do need you to know I admire you from afar. And whenever we have an opportunity, it would be good to get together again, because I
I would
so
love that.
appreciate you.
I would love that. Can I tell you one quick story about the above
Please.
and below the line? That's
Yes.
Enneagram. So there's a group down in LA who own the trademark above the line and below the line, and they
No.
sued us for using it. And the deal is they don't actually use it themselves. They just hold it, and they hold many trademarks, and they're known for suing people. This is kind of a thing they do.
Hmm.
So they came to us about 5 years ago with a lawsuit. They served us as we were just getting ready to do an event.
Oh
Uh,
no.
and I was so like, what? You guys are going to, they knew, I guess that's where they knew we would be or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, the lawyers basically said, my 8 got so lit up. The
Mhm.
control, you want to control me, and this is so unfair because you don't even use it. There isn't, I just really felt
Mhm.
my, and so I had to do my deep work around, okay, this is not a dangerous place. It is what it is. And just to come back, and they said, like, you probably could win, but maybe not. And it was going to cost me $1 million. And I was like, part of me wanted to put my house up on my mortgage my house so I could go after it, because of the injustice made me crazy.
Wow.
And particularly because I liked this model so much, and I knew how much it mattered to people. I wanted to fight for it. But
Mhm.
ultimately I thought, you know what, we're just going to have to, like, I'm going to get creative, and we're going to figure out how to um, move around in the world without, messing with their trademark.
Mhm.
And so you'll see, we can't market it anywhere. You can't say anything. We can just use it as educational purposes. But
Mm.
I surrendered to the vulnerability of, I have no control here, really.
Wow.
And that was a great gift they gave me. And
Mhm.
especially because it really broke my heart, that, like, we're all here together trying to help make the world a better place. And they're a coaching group too. And just,
Mhm.
like, what? And
Mhm.
so just to let my heart break about that, not
Mhm.
get caught up in a good, bad, right, wrong. It's their
Mhm.
prerogative to do it.
Right.
And um, and that kind of surrender was another gate. Like, I can point to that moment of being
Mhm.
sued with this thing as another way my pattern cracked.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And the irony of this is, I think of you as someone who's so generous, who's so much the opposite of that.
Yeah.
The spirit of, hey, let's all use this together. And I remember you saying something to me once, like, yeah, if you see anything on my website, feel free to use it.
Yeah.
And I just love that spirit. And I also think that's the best of a practitioner and also an 8. And that's a beautiful story of, and I think because, and maybe this is a good note to end on, I think it really is often about surrender, and seeing when we're really in our pattern, when we're really taken over by our ego, and being able to kind of bring something in, whether it's an insight or a feeling or a gut knowing about, like, I just need to surrender here. This is not
Yeah.
because my ego can't control it.
Exactly. And then the freedom of feeling like, I can feel over there. I have no, you are who you are over there, whoever you are doing
Yes.
that, it's not
Yes.
the way I want to do it, but it's so good to not feel a heart closed to them.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
feels so good.
Yeah, it's the love
Um,
the enemy kind of idea that's very important.
Yeah, and also just like there's a part in myself that's like that too, that doesn't want to, share in certain ways. And can I love that about me? And can I see the mirror? And
Yes.
there's so all of that. Yeah, but it's so every time I hear above below the line, people appreciating it, I always go, me too, I do too. And I do think it could be even more popular if we could market it even more, but that's all right.
Yeah.
We'll find it'll just force us to get even more creative.
Yeah. You didn't have to do anything to about the book, right? You could still have it in the book.
You
Yeah.
can still have it in the book. That's one
Okay.
place you can do it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a new book coming out called No Drama Teams, where
Mm,
we're going to teach more about how we do this.
mm.
And so we'll say more about it there.
Great, great. So it
Yeah.
sounds like people can find out about you through these two books
Yeah.
and how anything anywhere else that people can find you.
Yeah. Right now I'm at dianachapman.com. You can come find me there. And I'm working on some new things. I've left the conscious leadership group that I co-founded, and I'm in a exploration of where does my path want to go next. And so I'm,
Beautiful.
coming up with some new ideas.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being in conversation with us. It's always so wonderful to talk with you and hear about the exciting work you do and about the work you've done on yourself. And so thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're so welcome. I'm really happy to be with both of you.
yeah, it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that does it for this episode of the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. We hope you'll join us again next time where we talk about all things Enneagram.